every semester when I do, I think about what the theme is for this particular semester. I usually spend a lot of time kind of mulling over and kicking around what the theme would be for the semester, right? And as you can imagine, it's an interesting process to balance, a lot of things. The thoughtfulness around what the pertinent information for the semester might be, with the need to ensure that, we're really honoring the work and getting people prepared for what would be, another semester of greatness and helping students. But for this year, this theme came to me pretty easily. This was probably the theme that was the easiest for me in the almost 4 years that I've been here to write. Because from my perspective, it's really telling the narrative of MVC, both where we are and where, as a district and a college, we're headed. So, the theme for this one is foundations. I always like to pull quotes from wise people, right? And for me, this quote really resonates, right? The loftier the building, the deeper must be the foundation. Now, I want to spend a little time reflecting on the foundational work that we as a college have done in my time here, right? And we've done a lot. We've done a lot. In my first semester, in the first meeting with our former academic senate president, Dr. Tejada, we had a very candid conversation about the state and the condition of the college before I started. And she shared with me some things that, I won't share here publicly, but things that were very concerning to me, and quite frankly, a little alarming to me as an incoming president, about her lived experience with shared governance, or the lack thereof. These were things that the college had said, quite frequently and quite publicly at public forums, things that showed up in the accreditation midterm report, and work that collectively everyone knew the college had to do as it related to reinstating governance. We spent the first 8 months of my presidency working on one administrative procedure, AP 2410. It took us 8 months to do AP 2410. And if anyone had sat in the room while we were having the conversations around the work that went into crafting and developing our participatory governance policy, which undergirds everything we do as an institution, they would have heard some very challenging things. They would have heard about the history of the institution's lack of respect for faculty, for classified staff, for students, the lack of opportunity for people to have genuine engagement and involvement in decision-making processes. And as a president with fresh eyes, coming from an institution that had a very different governance structure, I agreed with that. It was very clear that the institution did not have a functioning participatory governance process. The decision-making was concentrated, not just in the president's office, but in the president. And so we spent 8 months rebuilding a process that we continue to tweak and modify and build upon to this day. And I'm proud of that work. I was part of that work. I invested a lot of myself into that. Dr. Todd and I would have conversations on Saturdays that would last 4 hours. And in my backyard, I would pace around my backyard. And we talked for 3 or 4 hours around how we were going to change not just the governance and what was on paper, but how we were going to institute genuine opportunity for engagement from stakeholders on campus. And we did that work. That has led to the creation of a series of subsequent things on this campus that I'm very proud of. Work that members of in this room, members of shared governance committees have invested tremendous time into doing. We built a functioning governance system that we continue to tweak. We've talked out how we more equitably allocate resources in a transparent process. We've built an educational master plan. We created a total cost of ownership, which is essential for an institution to really function, by mapping out what our costs are and how we can mitigate those things in the future. We've doubled down on investment in student basic needs. We've done what very few community colleges around the state have been able to do in constructing student housing. And I know there's mixed feelings about student housing here, but it's here. And if you walk and spend some time with the students who live in River Trail Village, as I do, and you listen to their narratives, you listen to how it has been able to transform single parents who are now able to live within steps of where they take classes, who are able to receive scholarships to subsidize and mitigate the cost of living there, then you'll see how impactful this has been towards students and their success. We're moving the Basic Needs Center. That was one of the first things that people talked to me about when I got here. Why do we have our students who have the most and highest need in the basement that drips, that's cold, that's insufficient? It took the work of a lot of people in this room and a lot of years to come up with a plan of where we're going to move it, to find the funding, and to ultimately start the process, which will be completed in just a few short weeks. We have worked towards ensuring fiscal stability of an institution that, I don't need to rehash it. If you've read the FitMat report, then it's on the paper what some of the challenges the institution faced. But the paper doesn't tell the deeper story as it relates to just how dependent the institution had been on soft funding, how reliant we've been for years on Hispanic Serving Institution grants to pay for core operational costs. These are big things. These are major things. This is a lot of work from a lot of people in this room. And I have to say that I'm proud of every person in this room who's contributed to that process. And publicly, I want to say thank you and offer you a round of applause for your work. Perhaps the thing that I'm most individually proud of is the last bullet, open communication. Something that I have practiced and done my best to practice in my time here. My PIO's office and I spend an incredible amount of time thinking about how we can properly tell the narrative of where we are as an institution by being honest and transparent, but not being draconian and not being over the top. And it's a difficult line to walk sometimes, where we're attempting to tell the truth about where we are and where we're going, but in a way that inspires hopefulness and demonstrates clarity of purpose in terms of where we're going to go and what it's going to take to get there. And perhaps we don't always stick the landing, but one thing that I think the folks that I've had the privilege of working closest with in my time here will say is that I have practiced, transparency and open communication to the fullest extent that I can. And again, I think these are things that are important for this institution because before I even started in this institution, these were areas of concern that many of you had shared with me as a president. And then in the almost 4 years that I've had the privilege of being your president, I have worked very hard towards respecting. Respecting. Very important concept. Now, it's obvious, as was mentioned earlier, that we are an institution that continues to be in transition and change. And one of those things is obviously the fact that this is my last opportunity that I have to stand in front of you at a Flex Day convocation as your president and outline perspective, vision. And in the spirit of honoring you as my colleagues, people that I respect, I want to commit to some things for you. And the first is that I'll be here through the end of the spring semester. It's very important, I think, because of what we as an institution will continue to grow, the things we'll continue to do in this semester to have continuity through the end of this academic year. And while I'm here, I'm going to continue to give you 100% of my time, my effort, and my leadership. There are two other things that I think are really important for the institution that, in order for me, as I transition out and prepare the way for whomever your next leader will be, that I do. And the first is to continue to work towards addressing the fiscal deficit that I've outlined in detail last semester. And for those that don't remember, in August, the college lost nearly the entirety of its Hispanic Serving Institutions HSI grant portfolio. We had the privilege of one grant carrying over beyond. We lost a lot of money. And as I mentioned before, the institution has been overly reliant upon soft money to pay for core operational needs. Now, I've outlined this in a video. I've talked about it in public forums and brown bags. I'd be happy to talk with you individually as well, should you want a little more context. But this is going to take some more work. We're not there yet. The other piece, which became very clear for anyone who served on the bargaining units, is that the last bargaining process, exposed some areas for growth from the institution's perspective. Collectively, there are some things that we can do a little differently, which I've spoken to union leadership about. I've shared some ideas on things that I think would help the institution to have a more productive bargaining process in the next round, which is going to be upon us very quickly. And so that's something that I want to continue to work on in this semester. The operative word in this quote for me is patience, right? When I think about foundations and I think about building something that's sustainable, that lasts beyond any single individual's time in an institution, there are many words I think that come into play there, but patience, iteration are things that really stick with me and that I think are important for this institution, especially as we look at where we're at as an institution from a fiscal perspective. There still is a budget deficit that needs to be addressed. And again, I've outlined that a lot, right? It's going to require the district to do a few things. Reduce its growing liabilities, preserve district fiscal security, stability. It's going to require us to identify new funding sources. It's going to ask us to reimagine collective bargaining, right? And again, I'm not saying anything that hasn't been said publicly in this very room. I think we all know this, right? Some things that I've put out that I'd like to explore with the district in my remaining time is to look at what we call a resource allocation model, which more equitably distributes the district's fiscal resources based upon a negotiated, predetermined percentage of general fund that would flow to each of the units. It's how some of the most successful and high-functioning districts across the state have adopted a model similar to this. It's something that I think, as I've explored with union leadership for really the past year or so, it would make sense for Napa Valley College to look into as well. And I think exploring interest-based bargaining is really helpful for this institution. I've heard from everyone who sat at the negotiation table, regardless of what their position was, their title, and where they sat, that at times the process was frustrating and it was muddled, right? Concepts of interest-based bargaining help to reduce some of those things by giving a very clear outline for how institutions should function, and really by lowering the temperature and reducing some of the stress and the conflict that can exist at times at the negotiating table. So these are two things that I think, as it relates to looking at the negotiation process for next cycle, that I will continue to work to the extent they make sense for the institution, in implementing, or at least setting up the infrastructure for implementation on the next cycle. Operative word for me here is creation. Creation and love. I think Napa Valley College has been in a creation phase for at least the past 2.5 years. But that creation phase will accelerate a lot. It's going to accelerate a lot the next few months that I'm here, and will be something that's extended through your next president. And I really love this quote, because again, this is what collectively, when we reflect back on the accomplishments that we've made, a legacy piece that I'm really proud to have built with many of you in this room. And that's the concept and the idea that even when organizations experience change, disruption by virtue of someone leaving or coming in, high-functioning institutions have built and established culture, business processes, ways of being, ways of communicating that can withstand disruptions, changes and transitions in leadership. And we've been working to that extent to build and create that for, again, at least the past 4 years. But we're not there yet. I think as our incoming academic senate president just stated, we're not there yet. While we made tremendous progress, there's still much more to do. While I think that the governance process that we've established is a significant upgrade and improvement on the lack of governance that existed when I got here, and there was a lack of governance when I got here, make no mistake. There's still a lot more work to be done. I don't think that anyone in this room would say that we have quite hit the mark on our governance process. While I think we are all working towards achieving that goal, there's still a little more progress we can make. I think that we need to honor our shared goals. I was very proud of the work that the Planning Committee did to create the Educational Master Plan. I'm proud of the subsequent plans that have come and spun out of that. Something that I'm very proud of for the institution is setting specific benchmarks. We have definitions for what student success means. Very specific ones as it relates to student persistence, student success in the classroom. In order to really honor those goals, leaning into being a data-driven institution that is self-reflective, that invests and takes time into looking at where we are as an institution and where we want to go, is the next phase of that work, right? Once you set the goal, track it, monitor it, make improvements throughout the process to ensure you're honoring and respecting the goal that you've laid out, right? And I think the work to do that is well underway and will continue. You gotta innovate. And this is something that's hard for us as a higher education institution. And I think that, as Naomi stated, it's hard for us within education because we're consistently asked to change, to innovate, to adapt to things that at times just seem completely unfair. And quite frankly, they can be unfair. The acceleration that we've seen in the attacks on higher education within the past 18 months are really highlight how challenging it is to be an educator in this country. You feel it, I feel it. The value of the work we do collectively as people who transform lives is at an all-time low in my career. And sometimes it's hard to get up in the morning, put on a suit, come in here, and make decisions, as it's hard for you to put on your clothes, walk into the classroom, and educate, as it's hard for you to step into your office and provide quality service to students. It's tough. It's hard work. Hard work and heart work, H-E-A-R-T. but the passion collectively that everyone in this room has, that I've been fortunate enough to see and experience in my time as your president, shows that the college is up to the challenge. Right? There are innovative practices and strategies that as an institution we have adopted and will continue to lean into being data-driven, self-reflective, to make those improvements. Because while we may be facing an all-time low in terms of national acknowledgement and recognition of the value of the work that we do, that in no way diminishes the value of the work that we do. I see it. I respect you for it. And I know the institution will continue to strive in those areas. Centering students, it's just what we do. Proud of what we do and how we center students in our decision-making at this institution. The last piece is I think the piece that it's the piece that feels maybe perhaps the most cynical to share, but is the most important. And what I actually had in here, instead of being intentionally hopeful, was being audaciously hopeful. I changed it last night, but I probably should have changed it back. Because I think that collectively as educators, we need to be audacious in our hope, unapologetic in our hope. Because if we're not hopeful that the work we do matters, and that despite whatever the current climate is, as it relates to education, that it's still transformative work, then we've lost our way, right? And that does require us to be intentional, deliberate, and audacious in our hope. And so I'm going to challenge you as I challenge myself every day, right, to reframe where we're at and put in context where we want to be. I think the institution is well positioned to continue work in accelerating, transforming lives, responding to changes in the national climate, and riding the wave. Because at some point, there'll be a leadership transition, federally or state. The pendulum will swing back towards education. We'll receive better funding. It'll create more opportunities for us. I've been in this system, as most of you in this room, I think, have, long enough to have weathered the peaks and the valleys of higher education funding and perception of higher education's value as a system. And the piece that will continue to sustain the institution through the upswing, as it has through some of the downswings, has been solid leadership, solid systems to inform decision-making, equitable and well-conceived strategic initiatives. When we have those things, then we're ready. And Napa Valley College is ready. We're shovel ready. We're ready for infrastructure projects and improvements. We're ready for ramping up student services initiatives, student success initiatives. We are primed and ready. Folks, we weren't primed and ready 4 years ago. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. We're ready. Now this is happening, the transition in leadership will happen quickly. And I've had some initial conversations with the board of trustees, and they've indicated their desire to move quickly, expeditiously towards identifying your next permanent president. And they are aiming for a fall semester start, which is, I think, possible, is very possible. They're going to move expeditiously, and while I don't have specifics and details on the timeline or the next steps, when this information comes to me, then I will share it with you, or it will be shared. I'm gonna start with that last bullet first, right? The mission doesn't change, right? Regardless of what happens, right? Whoever your president is, whoever the president in the White House is, whatever the funding metric or status is, you know, the work is still the work, right? And you will continue to strive, achieve, and do great things for this college, for these students. Because you're going to do it with collective purpose. All right, when we focus and channel the passion and commitment that everybody in this room has towards doing a good job into time-tested and successful strategies for improvement, as the college has done for many years, as I've been blessed to lead the college through in some very specific ways in my time here, we're going to do great things because we're building a strong foundation.